Okay, just making sure that it's showing up live. So if you're joining me, come on in and you can say in the comments, even if you're watching the replay, come in and say hi. You can post your questions also. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. So I want to start with a question. So if have you ever thought, you're thinking about you want to do your website, right? But you don't want to do it yourself and you've thought about hiring someone to build your website, but all these things start coming in, right? And you're not really sure what you need to do to do that, right? And you're not sure where to even begin. Maybe you're thinking about, do I need a logo first? Do I need to have all my, the website copy written? Do I need to, you know exactly what pages I want? So let me know in the comments if you struggle, if this is something that you're struggling with right now, especially if you're wanting to get your website done. A lot of female coaches and service-based business owners, they know that, they need a website, but that there's something that, you're unsure about where you even start with thinking about hiring someone to do it for you. So that's what I'm talking about tonight. I'm going to share with you three simple things to do before you hire a website designer, so that it can help you think about it, the process. So if you're watching the replay, I still would love to know your response to those questions, and you can still answer it in the comments. So here's the truth. Um, the websites that turn out the best are not, they're not always the ones that are the fanciest designs. It's they're the ones where the foundation, that main purpose are clear first. And that goes for all websites, right? So the first thing, you need to get clear on what you actually do. And so, a website designer, they build your website, but they can't decide, what your business does, right? So one of the most important things to get clear on is, what do we actually help people with? So that's something important that you need first before you even thinking about hiring. You're ready to hire a designer, create your website. That's the most important thing you need to know. It doesn't have to be something complicated, right? Something simple like, I help. What do you help with? That's the beginning start, place to start. I help blank with blank. For example, I help, new coaches build confidence in their business. I help women organize their finances. I help service providers simplify their marketing. So when you're clear on what you do and what you want them to do, that's also another thing, what you want them to do when they come to your website, it becomes much easier to build, right? That it's not gonna be so hard to think about those things, the copy, you know deciding what pages that you need and all that stuff. It's gonna help you making those decisions, because when it's unclear, your website ends up feeling confusing. So those are some things to think about. It feels that confusion. So the next thing is knowing what you want your website to do. So a lot of people think a website just needs to exist, right? I've got to have it. It just needs to be put out there. I slap on my logo. As long as I have my logo and, you know, my about page, and here's my services. But your website should actually have a job. It's kind of, think of it, it's like the same as you have a calendar tool. You have your email tool that you use to send out emails. Well, your website's part of that. It's a tool to help your business. And so it's the same way to think about. And so, but your what it needs a job. So before you hire a designer, it helps to ask yourself this question: what do I want my website to do for my business? So for example, are you wanting to book calls? Um, you know, you're wanting to explain your services, build trust with potential clients. You wanting to collect their email addresses, maybe register, you want them to register for a workshop, or join a group, join your membership, or whatever it is that you're wanting them to do. It needs to have that. It should guide them, whoever your ideal clients, to the next step of working with you. So when that next step is clear, the website becomes much easier to build, and it becomes a more helpful tool, and it starts doing that work for you and helping you, you know, in growing your business and giving you more clients. And so the last thing is know your main offer. So this really helps before hiring a web designer, is knowing what your website is going to promote. Most websites are built around one main offer. For example, your one-on-one coaching, your consulting services, your program, your membership, your workshop. When you have a main offer and it's clear what your main offer is, your website designer can structure your entire website around that. And it also is much helpful, more easier when there's a purpose, when you have that main goal of what you want to do. So without that clarity, people end up trying to promote everything all at once. And when you're doing that, it just becomes overwhelming. And then, people are going to come to you, they're not going to know if it's for them or what you're trying to do or what the purpose is. So, so if you've ever, thought about hiring someone to build your website, but you weren't sure what you needed to have ready first. So these are the three things, getting clear on what you do, knowing what you want your website to do, and knowing your main offer. So once those, you have those three simple pieces there, building your website becomes much simpler. So so before I wrap up, like I said before, if you're catching the replay, please comment, post your questions in the comments. Let me just make sure, because sometimes I don't see anything. Um, and if I missed your comments, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, if you're watching the replay, like I said, comment replay, say hello, post your questions in the comments. And so if you've been thinking about, creating a website for your business, and if you're at that step, you know what your website is, and you just have questions, right? You want help with figuring those things out. Um, the next step is usually getting clarity about what your website actually needs. So because once, that, your foundation is clear, you know that this is what you want to do, it becomes much easier, like I mentioned before. And so this is what exactly I help clients with inside my website done in a weekend service. And so during the process, we take your message, whatever that message is, your services, and the direction of your business, and turn it into a clear your website that's going to help you connect with your ideal clients. Another way to connect with your ideal clients. So if this is something you've been, thinking about, and you're ready to have someone do it for you, I invite you to book a call with me, and we can talk about this, talk it through to see if my service, Website Done in a Weekend, is the right fit for you and where you're at. And so if you're ready for that, comment weekend in the comments, and I'll get you the details, um, to see so you can learn more, and we can book that free call. So of course, once again, if you have questions, post them in the comments, and I will see you next week.